Meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. Our invocation will be by Mr. Parker and our Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Weekly. Please stand.
Dear Lord, bless this meeting and bless all those here. Help us make good judgments for our citizens in King George County. I ask these things in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Please remain standing and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
No amendments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now it's time for public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak? Do we have anybody online? Any correspondence? All right, well, let's just open up the meeting. Do I have reports from members of the board? I almost jumped ahead. Mr. Morris?
No report, ma'am.
Mr. Parker?
No report, ma'am.
Ms. Kupka?
I was only going to say that I attended our first budget work session last Thursday, February 13th. Wanted to thank Mr. Weekly and his staff and our auditors and financial planners for all of their work in putting that together, and looking forward to continuing the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
On February 11th, I attended, along with Mr. Weekly, the Planning Commission public hearing request concerning the Villages at King George Crossroads rezoning request. Mr. Hertenstein, the developer, his request was approved 5-3. However, there were a number of comments made by some of the members of the Planning Commission that I was not able to respond to at the time, but that deserve a response, so I'd like to respond now. Before I begin, I'd like to say that it is obvious that the members of the Planning Commission really care about King George County. They take their service very seriously, and they try very hard to do the right thing. Having said that, I take issue with a few of their comments. Number one, there is no downside to the service authority from the Villages development. It will provide us with significant connection fees and new customers. If fully built, I believe we would realize over $5 million in connection fees from the 250 townhomes and villas, plus additional connection fees for the apartments and commercial businesses. However, there will be a downside to the service authority if this rezoning is not approved. That doesn't mean it has to be approved for those of you on the Board of Supervisors. It's just you need to recognize there will be a downside to the service authority. Without these new connection fees, we do not have a way to fund either a new plant at Perkins Corner or decommissioning that plant and rerouting the wastewater to Hop Yard Farms, other than by adding to our debt, which is something we're trying to avoid. One member of the commission said basically the following. He said, the Villages may be good for the service authority, but that only helps 30% of King George County. This statement is incorrect. The service authority provides service to virtually all residents of King George County, not just those who are our customers. Every student and every teacher in our schools utilizes our facilities, even if they are not customers at their home. Virtually every business and their customers use our services. With all due respect, it's just wrong to suggest that only service authority customers use service authority services. Another member of the commission has repeatedly voiced concerns that the Villages subdivision could utilize all the available capacity of the Perkins Corner plant, and therefore some capacity should be kept in reserve in case someone else needs to use it. And our agreement with the Villages recognizes that fact. However, I believe that view is directly contradictory to the best interest of the service authority. We are constantly told that we should operate the service authority as a business. If that's true, then in my opinion, we should use every single bit of our availability as fast as we possibly can. Our goal should be to utilize every single ERC at Perkins Corner at the earliest possible time, first come, first served. Why would any business want to have unused capacity just sitting there? Especially a business like ours, where we need more customers and more connection fees. Finally, the commission is legitimately concerned about the impact that development will have on King George County. However, in my view, they seem to be assuming that the impact will occur immediately rather than over the 10-year time period that it will take to construct the entire development. For example, There are concerns that the schools will have to absorb 134 new students, as if that will happen immediately. Given the phasing of construction units, depending on what is built first, it could take 10 years for all 134 students to materialize. 13 per year is a significantly lower impact than 134 at once. That rezoning request will next move on to the Board of Supervisors for a final determination. On February 13th, I attended our budget work session with my colleagues. And on February 14th, I took part in a conference call regarding the water contamination issue at Fairview Beach. On the call were representatives from the Hampton Roads Sanitary District. I'll refer to them as HRSD. I'm going to use a whole bunch of acronyms, so you'll know I really did used to work for the federal government. But HRSD is the Hampton Roads Sanitary District. VDH is the Virginia Department of Health. DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. Tri-City County Soil and Water Conservation District, the Service Authority, and the Fairview Beach Residents Association were all on this call. Here's the background for those of you not familiar with the issue. For many years, the Potomac River at Fairview Beach has had high E. coli/bacteria levels at times. VDH does weekly testing and posts swimming advisories when the levels are too high for safe swimming. Around 2007-2008, Virginia Tech found approximately 27% of the bacteria was caused by human waste. The Fairview Beach Residents Association confirmed this finding via the Environmental Canine Service, which is a business located in Maine that has dogs sniff, just like they do for bombs or cadavers or whatever. They can also find human waste. Last year, HRSD was engaged to do testing and DNA analysis in an effort to locate the source of the problem. The 2007-8 testing was based on science that is now considered inaccurate and unreliable. Tri-City County is paying for the testing via a contract between HRSD and King George County. HRSD can only contract with a governmental entity. They're the equivalent, I guess, of the Service Authority for Hampton Roads. Service Authority sewage lines in Fairview Beach were one possible source for the contamination. HRSD performed 4 tests in 2019, 2 dry weather tests in the summer and 2 wet weather tests in the fall. The tests were all negative for any significant levels of human DNA. The conference call was to determine where we should go from here. As a resident of Fairview Beach, I have personal interest in this issue. And it's been my experience over the years that the high levels of bacteria normally correspond to rain or high winds. In the summer, it normally manifests itself as a thunderstorm coming through, followed by a front, which then churns up the water. So I'm not clear if it's based on the rain or the wind that whips up the surf. And apparently neither are the scientists. But at my suggestion, it was agreed to do some additional testing this coming summer because there were no wet weather tests last summer when the population of Fairview Beach is at its highest levels. And as a result, a lot more sewage would be present both in our lines and in the septic tanks at the adjacent trailer park. Tri-City County will get a proposal from HRSD for this round of testing. VDH will continue its role in testing on a weekly basis. But the preliminary conclusion at this point in time is that human waste does not appear to be the cause of the problem. All 4 tests have not shown any human waste. That's good news, not only for the residents of Fairview Beach and my grandchildren who swim in the river, but it also means that if this preliminary conclusion is confirmed, Service Authority lines are not leaking and causing the problem. So it's also good news for the Service Authority. We will be doing a couple more tests this summer, trying to get to the bottom of this. If it's birds or dogs, well, it's not good to be swimming in their bacteria either, but it's less bad than swimming in human waste. And it's hard for me to believe that we have more dogs or birds at Fairview Beach than anywhere else, since I happen to live there. The human waste is more dangerous because it contains the human pathogens. So that's why we've been trying really hard to nail this down. If it's not human waste, I don't know what we're going to do next, but at least at this point, there's no evidence of that, and the Service Authority lines have not been leaking. HRSD showed us a PowerPoint where they're doing all these, they showed us some case studies of other testing they're doing around the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, and their expertise is finding leaking sewage lines and then backtracking to where those leaks are caused. And so the good news is we don't seem to have that problem so far. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That was very informative. I just participated also in the first Service Authority work session, and it was always good to get our financial update and a good picture and informative work session, especially for our new board members. And that is my only part of my report. Thank you. All right. Have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Report from the county attorney?
No report this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentations and reports?
No presentations or reports?
Any action items or discussion items?
No, ma'am.
All right, general manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Provide you a few updates. Last time I spoke to you about a meeting I had scheduled with DEQ to talk about the Dahlgren groundwater withdrawal permit. And we talked about some other items while we were down there. This was driven by a development that is planned in the Dahlgren area, known as Hope Retreat. I've spoken with their design engineer since that meeting, and their numbers are substantially lower than what was anticipated. So that could be favorable. We would be able to serve that project with existing capacity. However, part of that discussion reviewed some information on well abandonments, or I would like to call potential well abandonments. DEQ came to this board or provided a presentation back in 2016 and outlined some of the wells that may need to be abandoned and also the need for geophysical logging for several wells. That's spelled out in our existing groundwater withdrawal permits. Most of those have a timeline of 2026. However, you can't wait until 2026 to provide information such as geophysical logging because it has to be part of the permit review process. So I won't bore you with this. You can go back and read. It's just some definition according to USGS of borehole geophysics. But basically with the logging that they do, there's an observatory well. They go down and they look at different formations. They look at what's present there, as you can see, clay and so forth. But they want to look, do you just go through one aquifer? Do you bridge several aquifers similar to two wells that we have over at Hop Yarn Farms that goes through two aquifers? So that's just to give you a visual. But they send a probe down there and they can capture all that various data. And then they wanted to see any well pump depth level where we have our well pumps set. So as they go through, they look at your withdrawals, not only what you're permitted by from VDH, but primarily what compared to your groundwater withdrawal permit limits and your monthly and annual withdrawal limits. Permits that you apply for now, they are moving those up to a 15-year. I believe current permits are good for 10 years. So this is a lot of data, a lot of information we have to put forth. I just want to let you know we are working on a plan with Draper Aiden where we're going to address the wells that are spelled out for abandonment, any of the wells that are spelled out to be raised, which can affect yield rates. I don't have that information tonight, so I'm not trying to bring forth panic. I'm just putting it out on your horizon because it was just originally put out on mine. But we will address that, and I will come back to the board with a plan, whether that's our scheduled times and when we're going to do the geophysical logging, if there are additional wells we feel will have to be drilled. But look for that in the upcoming months as I work with Draper and Aiden on a plan. Mr. Bennett?
Madam Chair, if I may. Mr. Wickley, I know you're not a well driller by your experience, but why would you go through one aquifer to get to one below it? Can you answer that?
I don't have an answer for that, sir. I see Mr.
Yeah,
Parker may.
the answer is for withdrawal rates and quality of water. Depending on the soil types, rock formations, you're going to be able to extract a certain amount of water from any given aquifer. So you may have to punch through one or two to get the amount of water that you're looking to withdraw. Certain aquifers are only going to have a pump. If you're in a clay stratum, for example, it's not going to have the same recharge rate or the same withdrawal rate as a sand stratum or a fractured rock stratum would. So depending on how much water you're looking to get, you're going to have to go into a stratum that's going to allow you to extract that amount of water. And then usually you'll seal off the wells into that particular aquifer. So that would be my question, is how you're going to necessarily find the pumps, because I'm not with the geophysical, because usually they seal off those aquifers, the pump within the aquifer, so you can't get past a certain point.
So let me ask you, Mr. Parker. We'll take Mr. Weekly off the hot seat. So as you're drilling the well, you find the first aquifer, and at that point, you can test to see how much water is there in terms of how much you're going to be able to draw out of that well, as well as the quality of the water. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, you'll do a pump test. Usually they run for a 24-hour drawdown is what you're doing. You're measuring how much water you can pull out of it in a 24-hour period and how much it lowers the aquifer when you do that. It's basically a giant stress test, and if that doesn't meet and then you can test the water quality as well. So if any of those don't line up for what you need, you keep moving to the next best system.
Okay, the reason I'm asking this, it's my understanding, based on what I thought DEQ had said, maybe you remember this too, Ms. Binder, but I thought they didn't like us going through one aquifer to another one below. But based on what Mr. Parker has said, that may be the most logical way to get the most water. So is that fair to say they don't like you going through an aquifer to another one?
Both points are accurate, and so let me answer your question about how would you access to get that information. So you basically have to drill another absorbatory well beside that to do this, is according to Ms. Tisdale from DEQ Central Office. To answer your question, Mr. Bennett, the confusing part with me is you have two state agencies. VDH gives you the certificate to operate for this well, so they look at your drawdown information. They tell you what your safe yield rates are for your well production. But then you have the groundwater withdrawal program that is ran by the other state agency, DEQ. They don't like the mixed aquifer. I think if you get back to Mr. Parker's comments, if you can somehow shore up so you're not blending between the two aquifers, they may permit that. So again, for discussion purposes tonight, just letting you know those requirements are there. We will put forth a plan. Obviously, I don't know what the geophysical will cost at this time. I'm talking to AC Schulte. They're one of the providers that do well work, just to get an idea, to see what we're dealing with. Again, most of these timetables are around 2026, so you want to have the information in about around 2025. But one of the abandonments that are on the list is out at, excuse me, is out at SAF. But they list them out as potential gravel packed reason for abandonment. I have had experience at a prior well where it became encrusted, so that's things that are shelving off, they're breaking off and blocking your veins that are coming into your aquifer. And I've had success where companies came in and they oversized the bore, and on the way out, they can remove that encrustment. I'm not guaranteed success on all of this. I just know I've seen it at one well before. It did lower your yield rate some, but it kept your well into production, which was important in that factor. So again, information for here tonight, it just came across my radar, and I thought, okay, well, we need to plan, because again, these permits are now granted for 15 years. And if you're going to go ask for more capacity, for example, like we look for Dahlgren, there's a modification process. If it's larger amounts, then you're just looking to basically start anew with your permit. But this is something, again, just came across the radar. I want to make you aware of it. And staff will start putting together a plan to bring back for you to review and give your blessings.
I have one more question, hopefully only one, I know. So DEQ is worried that this well has this gravel encrusting, or whatever you want to call it. And what is that based on? How do they know that?
I don't have an answer for that, sir, and I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you tonight. I will go find you an answer. Obviously, that information had to come from some source. They did point back that they didn't have the geophysical logging. So I don't know if those are assumptions that are built into that. That's why I think it's important to have that information to use to check the water quality, to check the yield. But I do not know how they came to that conclusion.
All right. So is the borehole geophysics designed to find out if that's the case?
It's designed to look at, number of aquifers you have that are, that you are pulling from, water quality, as Mr. Parker informed. It is to give you an idea, because these observatory wells will be near the production well. You can't go, 500 feet, or I should use a more extreme circumstance. You can't go a half acre, an acre beyond where you're drilling. They want these observatory wells as close as possible to your production well, because they have assumptions in there that observatory well would match either water quality, yield rates that you have in your production well.
Thank you.
I will have a note, sir, to find out. I believe it was anyway, I have the name of the presentation. I'll track that down with DEQ.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly.
On the wastewater side, actually, we had our provider out today going over our belt press. That equipment, I thought I heard today, was 17 years, I think, of service. It sees a lot of service throughout the year. It is our only solids handling facility. We're hearing good things that, maybe some minor maintenance, no major overhaul, so that was good news. We'll get an official report hopefully next week, but also they were giving any tips or observations to operations staff, whether, you need to slow your belt down or add some more tension or just some operational suggestions. So we do look forward to that report next week, but I do think, and as I lead into my next bullet point, it is a good idea that if your equipment hasn't been reviewed or evaluated in some time, you should bring in folks to give you some idea of major overhauls, replacement, because everything will at some point reach a point of life. Mr. Bennett, do you have a?
Madam Chair. So the belt press inspection was just routine maintenance. There were no problems that initiated that?
And I know Mr. Majeski was on site today. We didn't get any indication of any major overhaul, but they're going to give a report.
But what I'm asking is, you brought them in just on a regular sort of site review rather than because we were having problems, is that right?
That is correct, and we are in budget season. It would have been nice if I had them out in October, so I'm sorry it's right on the heel of our budget, but I wanted to know, okay, do we have major overhaul expenses? Or even from capital planning, are we 2, 3, 4 years out? So I'll be anxious to see what's in a report, but we don't have any feedback from them that when they were on site that, wow, you guys are looking at, major overhaul this year. So there are some components that get replaced every so often, like the belt itself. If you think of a printing press, like a web, and it's rolling around, rollers, that's what's happening here in the sludge production. But seemed like good news today, but it was because it's been 17 years. It needs to be looked at, and it's a big-time investment and important equipment operation for the service authority. It's a good question.
As someone who always says preventive maintenance, I'm very happy.
I appreciate that. And that leads into the second bullet there. Mr. Bennett caught me in that activity today. We had, well, actually, no, this is the aqua aerobics portion. I'll get to the water in my next slide. So aqua aerobics, some of their field folks were out on site today, but we've got a proposal being worked up. They're going to come out. We have variety of their equipment at site. So we have filters at Perkins and Dahlgren that are aqua aerobics. And then we have the full-fledged aqua aerobics design of our SBRs at Fairview Beach and Hop Yard. So there's a couple things we have coming up. One, there's an on-site factory visit where they actually will, I don't know if it's fly you out, I believe, but they put you up at their expense. And they have some on-site training there. They'll go through their equipment, but they can do a lot of field simulation there. So that's going to be one part. There's a second part of this where their field staff will not only come out and do an evaluation of that equipment I just mentioned, but they will also provide some on-site training, which, that's been a constant that I've heard from our staff since I've been here, is that they may have been assigned to the plant, but a full-fledged training of the SBR system, more so beyond just your pages in your O&M manual. So again, it's networking with these folks, reaching out to them. They're here. Anytime you have process issues, if you can't figure it out, they are the design folks you can reach out to. So they are a resource. But again, it's one of those maintenance checks. We have some systems such as Hop Yard. You'll hear staff mention, it's not fully automated. Well, did we ask for that in the programming? Did we tweak something different since the plant was installed? Are we at the baseline where we need to be? So again, I deal well with list. I want to know what all the issues are or what we need to work on, and then we can build in budgeting. We can build in time, but this is more of a wellness check, if you will. Then some other things. I reported this first bullet point at our budget meeting. We have reached our projected 50 full-service connections. And actually, I believe Patty informed me today there was 6 or 7 more we added just today. So that's good for our revenue. Again, 50 was, we want it to be conservative. Again, you get a chance to go back to your audit. I believe it's page 65 that sticks out to my mind that has our connections, the cumulative connection increases since 2010. But I think it was worth mentioning again to the general public as well. And we have had our first kickoff meeting with Muni Billing. I think that went well once we got started. But we realized that we will have to have weekly meetings in order to be successful. For right now, our projected rollout is April the 1st, 2020, and we will put out mailers to our customers. We will utilize KG Alert. We will also use our website. But what we want to do with that mailing in the KG Alert, we want to point them all back to our website. So April 1st is our target. But there are many weekly meetings to have information flowing back and forth. I appreciate all of team members. I know Chris has a data dump that he's working on for them. Our treasurer, Mr. Jones, involved, Ms. Ward, financiers, many of folks from the KG team that is working to make that April 1st date possible. Madam Chair, that's all I have for my report.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Not yet. I have one thing.
You have one question?
I have one thing. Mr. Weekly and I talked about this a little bit after the last budget work session. Our 5-year plan has 50 connection fees a year built into it. That's about $1 million. And you'll see in the audit report that Mr. Weekly handed out that number stayed pretty solidly above 50. Hop Yard's been cranking out about 50 homes a year. And they've kept up that pace, and they've got another 400 or so to build. So that gets us another 8 years roughly at that number. But if any of these other developments do come along, the point I want to make, and Mr. Weekly and I discussed this briefly today, is I think as a board we should consider at some point these connection fees should not just go into the regular budget. They should go into capital improvements, or they should go into debt mitigation. I don't know where they should go. That's something for Davenport and people who are better at that kind of stuff than I am. But I think we ought to think about that down the road, that if there's all these other developments on the horizon, the Planning Commission said, and hopefully that will inure to our benefit. We will get more connection fees than we've been getting if we have multiple developments going on. But we ought to be thinking in advance if we are blessed with that someday, what are we going to do with it? I don't think we should just, I don't want to say squander it, that's not the right word, but to just put it back into the regular budget for operating expenses probably isn't the smartest approach.
Reallocate it, how's that for,
Yep, just have some sort of planning. I mean, we want to get our debt down. We have capital improvements, maybe we use some of it for each once we hit our 50 or 55 or 60 or whatever. So it's just something to be thinking about in the future. Thank you.
is a good thought.
And I would concur, Mr. Bennett. One of the things the five-year rate plan was trying to accomplish is to get us to where the revenues, which is i.e. the billing, pays for your operational side, where your connections would go back to infrastructure. So we've got a ways to get there, but that was the start that the board approved last year. Living off of connection fees for operations, I mean, it doesn't really leave much for capital. So I think a very good point, and I believe we're on our way to that.
It's a positive step. You have anything else?
No, ma'am.
How about a motion for adjournment?
We're talking for the next budget work session, right, is the date I need to provide? Yes. I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors adjourn to February 27th, 2020 at 6:30 PM.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye. Motion carries, and we are adjourned. I call to order this regular meeting of the King George Board of Supervisors. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair.
I move to amend the agenda to add a closed session.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? No. Chair votes aye. Next up is public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak?
Good evening. I'm Don Shelton. I live off of Indiantown Road. I've been traveling that road in that intersection at Dow Green Road since 2001. It is an extreme dangerous one. 3 weeks ago, I was almost involved in an accident there. Missed me about 6 feet. The person that caused the accident was driving about 60 miles an hour in a 40 miles an hour zone. So, one have been discussing about a turnabout. I did some research, because for that day accident, I said, we need a red light. But I've done some research this week about the turnabout and how they work and what serve. I really think that intersection could use a turnabout. Meantime, if the local law enforcement can do things to slow them down, like sending the American Legion parking lot, run their radar and just turn the blue lights on, let them know how fast they're going, might help. But those idiots drive 60 and 70 miles an hour on 206. And something been done about that about 20 years ago, but either way, if we can get VDOT put us a turnabout that might be a good idea. And thank you guys for serving our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to talk? Is there anybody online? Any correspondence? All right, well, we will close public comment and reports from members of the board. Mr. Stonehill.
Thanks, Mr. Shelton, for coming up. I know you and I have talked about that at great lengths, and we'll pass it on to Sheriff Giles and see what we can do with that. And hopefully we'll get a roundabout here some point or another. Thursday the 6th, we went to the local government legislative day in Richmond. Myself, Dr. Young, Mrs. Kupka. We met with a lot of local government officials from all over the state and compared notes on how their counties were doing as well as ours. Governor Northam was the keynote speaker at lunch. Then on the 7th and 8th, myself and Mrs. Kupka attended the Vaco County Board Chairpersons Institute, which is a training class put on by Vaco for all new board members. Again, there were people from all over the state of Virginia, and it was very interesting just to see how many of the counties have all the exact same issues that we have here in King George and how they're handling them. So it's really good to hear from everybody's different perspective. Then on Monday the 10th, the whole board, we all attended the 300th anniversary commitment to education night at the high school. It was a great time, had all. And the keynote speaker there was Jermon Bushrod. It showed great ways that King George High School excels at teaching our young folks here in the county. And then on Tuesday 11th, I attended our second budget work session at Company One. We obviously have a lot of things coming this year, and we need to do a lot of juggling here in the county. And I finally got a second person to sit on the Infrastructure Advisement Committee, and I would like to appoint Brett Moffitt to be my second Dahlgren person on the Infrastructure Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nay? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
And that's all I have.
Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the 6th, I attended a joint meeting of the King George Republican Committee and Tea Party. It was a very good meeting. It was great to have a conversation with those guys. On the 10th, I also attended the Career and Technical Education Night at the high school, Mr. Bushrod gave a very inspirational address. It was very motivating. So I was very happy to have the opportunity to meet with him and speak with him. I also had a great conversation with Captain Plouffe from the base. I'm looking forward to continuing conversations and working with the base on making King George, especially the Dahlgren district, fit better for the county, for their growth, for our growth, and that partnership. On the 11th, I attended our budget work session, and we had some great discussions. We have some serious decisions to make, and I look forward to those conversations. But that brings me to what Mr. Shelton was talking about. Thank you for coming out tonight, sir, and addressing us about the roundabout at Indiantown. I've heard from a lot of my constituents on both sides. Ultimately, my decision is based on something very simple. If you look at Dahlgren Road, it's lined with houses. It's a residential road. 2 lanes, head-on, no shoulder. 18-wheelers flying down at 60 miles an hour, some carrying fuel, up to 6,000 pounds of fuel. You know how explosive that is if that winds up in somebody's living room? Not to mention, we don't know what's going to the base. We don't know what's going to Maryland. I think a roundabout, while it's not going to address eliminating truck traffic on Dahlgren Road, it'll be a great deterrent with that turn radius and hopefully make people take roads like 3 to 301 instead of cutting through on 206. So I look forward to that coming to fruition. Hopefully, smart scale happens for that. Lastly, I was very pleased to see that House Bill 961 was passed on for the year by the committee, so at the General Assembly. So very good news. Lastly, I'd like to appoint Ms. Carrie Cleveland to our Budget Advisory Committee. However, before that a second, and I just wanted to give my colleagues the full picture. This would be a second year in a row that Ms. Cleveland would serve on this. She is also my appointee for the Infrastructure Advisory Committee. However, I had no one else that has come up with interest. She reached out to me and said last year she enjoyed and she feels more comfortable engaging in the debate. She's done her homework and she would appreciate if I would have considered reappointing her. So I said I would be bringing that to the board tonight, so.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and that concludes my report.
Ms. Gupka.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. My apologies. Mr. Shelton, thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for your comments. I couldn't agree more. I suspect that project might, if done properly, might be our highest scoring project for Smart Scale based on safety needs at a minimum. So thanks very much for your comment. I fully support that project. February 6th, I attended Local Government Day in Richmond with Dr. Young, Mr. Stonehill, and Mr. Stonehill. I want to thank Dr. Young for joining us as we heard briefings regarding the importance of lobbying our state representatives to support the bills that will have a direct impact on our ability to raise revenue for our community. At this point, House Bill 785, authorizing counties to, among other items, impose admissions and cigarette taxes in the same manner as cities can, and also Arlington and Fairfax County only, made it through the House and crossover and is now on the agenda for the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I would urge my colleagues again, renew your emails, look up the members of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee because it is on their agenda for tomorrow morning. On February 7th and 8th, I attended also with Mr. Stonehill, the VACO Chairman's Institute. We heard informative sessions on the role of the chair and vice chair in a local governing body, and I want to thank Dr. Young for taking time out of his Saturday to teach a session. So thank you, sir. On February 10th, I also attended the 300th anniversary celebration CTE night event at King George High School. Thank you to all who contributed to the program, and thank you to Mr. Jermon Bushrod for coming back to King George to deliver the keynote speech. On February 11th, I met with Naval Support Activity South Potomac Community Planning Liaison Officer Andrea Hornung regarding meeting mutual needs of the base and our community. Later that day, I also met with Dr. Linda Millsaps regarding George Washington Regional Commission. I toured the Wayside Parkland mitigation property, also known as the Buckler House. I am hoping that we might be able to host an open house there to allow citizens to see the layout of the property before scheduling a town hall. I think if citizens were afforded the opportunity to walk the property, to see the house, to see the shoreline, they might better understand the limitations and possibilities on what we can do moving forward. That evening, I attended the second county budget work session. Thank you again to staff for their diligence in the budget process. On February 14th, my colleagues and I participated in the interview selection process of our 2 finalists for county attorney. Thank you to Director of Human Resources, Amanda Sumil, for guiding that process. On February 15th, I hosted office hours at Smoot Library from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. 3 citizens visited with me during the 2 hours I was there. We talked about economic development, the new microbrewery ordinance, and school capital needs, among other things. And today I met with Dr. Rob Gates, who serves as one of our citizen representatives on FAMPO's Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee, or CTAC, and our Director of Economic Development, Mr. Nick Miner, regarding CTAC's role. We currently have a vacancy on the FAMPO CTAC, so please contact your supervisor. These appointments are not bound by your district. They serve to represent the whole county, so if that's something you're interested in, contact your supervisor if you'd like to participate. I also attended FEMA's community coordination meeting this afternoon regarding changes in the flood insurance rate map with Dr. Young, Chairwoman Binder, and community development staff. There will be more to follow regarding the county's outreach to any affected property owners, which staff indicates from a structure standpoint are minimal compared to 2014's effort. As part of our 300th anniversary commemoration, I want to make sure everyone is aware that L.E. Smoot Memorial Library will celebrate its 50th anniversary with an evening in the Stacks on Saturday, February 29th, from 6:30 to 9 o'clock p.m. Admission is free, but you do need to register for tickets on Eventbrite so you can be included in the food and beverage count. They are also hosting an open house the next day, Sunday, March 1st, from 2 to 5 p.m. if you can't make the festivities on the prior evening. And save the date, based on volunteer groups' availability, the Department of Parks and Recreation will host a community cleanup day on Saturday, March 28th. More information will follow. Thank you again to all of you in our community for the opportunity to serve you. Please don't hesitate to contact me via email or visit me during office hours with your cares and concerns for our community. My next office hours will occur on Saturday, March 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Smoot Library. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Granger.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Shelton, thank you for coming and sharing your concerns. I think the whole board agrees with you that that's a very significant intersection and cause for concern. I believe I remember correctly, Mr. Nick Miner told us that it was ranked number 54 in the state, which to me at first sounded like not good because 54 seems like a large number, but just being ranked, because I think it was the top 100, was a significant milestone. So it's a pretty significant project from, it sounds like, the state's perspective. So hopefully that, as being one of our smart scale projects that we put forth, it will be one that gets done sooner than later. So, thank you. On Monday, February 10th, I also attended the CTE Commitment to Education. I'd like to say thank you to all the staff that made that happen. Thank you, Mr. Bushrod, for coming to be the keynote speaker. And also before that, as part of that, I'd like to say congratulations to all those students who were inducted into the National Technical Honor Society. Well done to them. On Tuesday, February 11th, I also attended the second budget work session. We had a good discussion. Afterwards, we also discussed the SMART scale at fairly significant length. So I appreciate the good discussion amongst my colleagues and the opportunity to discuss it thoroughly to make sure all concerns were addressed. And I think at the end of the day, while we may not have all agreed, I think we came to a consensus on the right projects to put forth, and hopefully it will be for the best of the county overall. Friday, February 14th, I also participated in the county attorney interviews. And then yesterday, Monday, February 17th, I attended the FRE meeting. Handful of things came out of that. Big one will be in May 5th through 7th. There's going to be a group called Consultant Connect FAM. They're going to give them a tour and a workshop. All the EDs from the region will have the opportunity to brief. I'm sure Mr. Minor's probably heard about this to some degree. And then they're going to, based off of the tour and the brief out that we gave them, they're going to kind of give us a panel discussion back to the region to tell what went well, what didn't go well, in order for the idea of trying to bring in new business. And so things to work on and things we did well. Some other things that came out, they had a lot of statistics that they've been working on gathering. Some interesting ones. Our population growth has been for over the area for the last, oh man, I don't remember the time frame for this. It shows 1.5%, which was larger than the U.S., which was 0.7%. I apologize, I don't have the time frame. I have to go back and find that. But they also said the job growth had increased by 1.35%, which might not sound like a good thing, but when you take into account that population growth is all ages from 0 to whatever, being only 0.15% off actually would probably be pretty accurate to being a one-for-one in order for having new jobs for new population coming into the area. So it sounded like that was really encouraging from our region perspective, that things were going well. There's a whole host of other statistics that they were going to be posting them up on their site. I can make that available and post it to make it available to everyone if they're interested in looking through that stuff. Other than that, I still have an opening on the Infrastructure Advisory Committee, one position left. So if anyone is interested, I'm still looking. Please reach out to me and let me know, and we can discuss and see if it'd be a good fit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. On February 11th, I participated in our second budget work session. Outside agencies were discussed, those mandated and non-mandated, and also we had a long discussion on smart scale grant choices. I also toured earlier in the morning the Buckler House in a nice fog that set in over the river. In concert with Ms. Kupka's holding an open house at the property, I also suggested a survey be available for those that attend so we can get their feedback. On February 13th, I participated in the first Service Authority budget work session. And on February 14th, I also participated with my colleagues in the final interviews for a full-time county attorney. On February 18th, I attended the FEMA Community Coordination and Outreach meeting, and more information will follow. And I also attended on February 10th the CTE event at the high school. It was very nice to see, once again, touring all the rooms, and it was a nice presentation. I thank you to all the teachers and all the people who spoke at the event. It was nice to see all the work that the students do, and always remember that you don't have to just go to a second or four-year college, that you can get certificates and you can do workforce development to have a career, because the world is your oyster, honestly, for jobs. You don't have to always go to college, and it's really important that we offer the students of King George County a way to not just go to college, to find your career, and it's a great opportunity. On February 18th, I might have repeated myself, I attended the FEMA Community Coordination Outreach meeting, and more information will follow. On February 29th, I wanted to make sure everyone once again comes out to Evening in the Stacks. I did enjoy writing and voicing a short video to be presented at the event. I did that because I can't attend, because I will be at the NACO Legislative Conference with Dr. Young. So I thank you, Ms. Kupka, for stepping in for me. You probably have to give a speech, so be ready, because that's what I was supposed to do. But I wanted to tell you two interesting tidbits, though, that I found in my research for the video. Many might not know that, but Mr. Smoot, he was a very big philanthropist, and one of the things that he liked to do was purchase school bonds. And he purchased the $150,000 bond that built Ralph Bunche High School, which was kind of a really cool tidbit. And I thank our library director, Ms. Robin Cox, for giving me information that so I could say these little tidbits. And then the last one was, Mrs. Smoot was a little bit of an eccentric, and she spent a lot of money in the memorial room. She made it look very nice, and she had these really expensive curtains built. And it's a long name, so I'm not going to repeat it. But she also made her dress for the opening night of the library from those curtain materials, so that was kind of neat. It reminded me, for those that might be a little older, of Carol Burnett's famous sketch called Gone with the Wind, Went with the Wind, where she made the dress out of the curtain, so I just remember that, it made me chuckle. And finally, I thank Mr. Shelton for coming out and talking about his concerns with Route 206 intersection. I understand. And in the smart scale discussion, I also had my concerns about 301 and doing too much on there when it's not needed to be done. I think VDOT is kind of pressuring us to make it a thoroughfare, and I don't think we need to. We're not there yet, and we shouldn't just do something to do something, if you know what I mean. And lastly, I do not use social media, but I encourage the Shiloh residents to contact me through email or by phone. My information is on the county website. And thank you. That's the end of my report. Just a second. Just give me 1 second. I have a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Do we have any constitutional officers? All right. Report of the county attorney.
No report at this time, Madam Chair.
All right, next up will be our public hearing. The King George County Board of Supervisors will now hold a public hearing to receive public input regarding case number 1911-Z04, amendment to the King George County zoning ordinance to replace Courthouse Primary Settlement Area with Courthouse West, and Route 301 primary settlement areas to the, if I butcher this word, applicability of the mixed-use development district. Amendment to section 14.2. I will first ask for the staff report, and I will open the floor for public comment. I ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Upon completion of public comment, I will bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight, depending on information received during public comment. Floor is yours.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Supervisors. I am Louis Pancotti, and I will be presenting case number 19-11-Z04, amendment to the King George County zoning ordinance to replace Courthouse Primary Settlement Area with Courthouse West and Route 301 primary settlement areas to the applicability of the mixed-use development district, amendment to section 14.2. So, on October 1st of last year, the comprehensive plan was updated. One of the changes split the former Courthouse Primary Settlement Area into the Courthouse West Primary Settlement Area and the Route 301 Primary Settlement Area. So, So to refresh your memory, this is the Courthouse Primary Settlement Area in the 2013 comprehensive plan. Here is the now Courthouse West and the Route 301 primary settlement area. So Article 14, Mixed-Use Development District of the zoning ordinance establishes the regulations that are intended to promote economical and efficient land use through the unified development and mixed uses within individual structures, improved levels of amenities, appropriate and harmonious physical development, creative design, and better environment than generally achieved through conventional district regulations. Section 14.2, applicability, applies these regulations to the courthouse primary settlement areas as put forth in the county's comprehensive plan. Because that settlement area has now been split in two, a text amendment is needed to this section. So here's the text amendment. All that's changing is that the courthouse primary settlement area is now being replaced with Courthouse West primary settlement area and Route 301 primary settlement area. So lastly, at its January 14th meeting, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward this case to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of approval. Therefore, Department of Community Development staff and the Planning Commission recommend that the King George County Board of Supervisors approve case number 19-11-Z04, amendment to the King George County zoning ordinance to replace Courthouse Primary Settlement Area and with Courthouse West and Route 3, 301 primary settlement areas to the applicability of the mixed-use development district, amendment to section 14.2. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions? All right, thank you. Do you have any public comment? Anybody online? Any written correspondence? Do you have any discussion you would like to?
Sorry.
That's all right.
I move to approve case number 19, TAC 11, TAC Z04 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you for your work. Next up is presentations and reports.
No presentation.
Any presentations?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Action items. Department of Economic Development and Tourism, tourism funding request for continuation of landscaping maintenance.
Yes, ma'am. Keeping in compliance with the land use permit number 639-43746, where 104 serviceberry trees and 120 crepe myrtle bushes were planted within the 5.5-mile stretch of highway medians between Route 301 and Grover Drive on real property under the ownership, control, or jurisdiction of VDOT. The permittee, County of King George, shall be responsible for continuing the maintenance of the facilities placed within the highway right-of-way. The TAC recommends that the motion to accept the estimate of $15,773 from Old Town Lawn LLC pass at the February 27, 2019 regular meeting of the Tourism Advisory Committee be sustained. Staff recommends, in addition, that the continued allocation of $15,773 of tourism funds for the automatic renewal of the landscape maintenance contract for 2020 be approved. I'd recommend that the Board of Supervisors authorize $15,773 of tourism funds to be applied to the automatic renewal of the landscape and maintenance contract for 2020, subject to the approval as deformed by the county attorney.
Any discussion?
I move to approve and authorize
I can do it during discussion. Go ahead.
as presented.
Any discussion?
1 second.
I'm
All right, I'll second.
just, if I may, as a point of discussion, can we make sure the procurement officer receives an updated certificate of liability insurance because the current COI is expired. It expired January 10th, 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
So as long as that happens, I'm good with that.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Department of Economic Development and Tourism, amendment to the Tourism Advisory Committee Charter to allow remote participation.
Yes, ma'am. The Virginia FOIA Act authorizes public bodies to provide means by which members may participate in public meetings of the public body by electronic communication, as long as the public body adopts a written policy governing such participation in compliance with applicable provisions of the FOIA, and the policy is strictly and uniformly applied without exception to the entire membership and without regard to the identity of the member requesting remote participation or the matters that will be considered or voted on at the meeting. The Tourism Advisory Committee has requested that the board approve an amendment to their bylaws authorizing them to promulgate a policy to allow remote participation in their policies, and recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the bylaw amendment.
So moved.
Second.
I have one discussion question. They're able to do it under the same rules that we are, correct?
Yes, ma'am. They requested this because they have been having a hard time getting more than a quorum to participate in the meetings, and they asked for a remote policy, and I advised them that if they were going to pursue that policy, that they need to mirror the Board of Supervisors and thus the Service Authority Board of Directors, who also mirrored the policy behind the Board of Supervisors as well. So it's the same policy across the board for all of our governing bodies.
Well, I asked that too because I know with Mr. Bennett, you only get 2 times, right, per year?
Exactly.
Okay, and they know that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
being they're not a governing body and they're advisory, serving at the pleasure of the board, though, they're not subject to anything else other than what we deem in their bylaws, correct?
Exactly. When I said governing bodies, but I meant committee as well. It's an advisory committee, and their policy should mirror the Board of Supervisors, and that was recommended to them before they sent the request to the Board of Supervisors.
There, if I may, there are certain provisions of FOIA that do not apply to advisory bodies. However, I believe the meetings provision such as this would apply.
Okay.
Makes sense.
So I have a question, because in reading this, number 4, a quorum of the committee is physically assembled at the primary or central meeting location. So if you're telling me they can't already meet the quorum there at the meeting, if they're not already meeting the quorum and they want to participate remotely, I'm not getting how this helps.
No, ma'am, I didn't say they have a problem meeting the quorum. I said they have a problem meeting more than a quorum. So they'll have minimum participation, but we're trying to do is encourage maximum participation, so we get maximum insight and input into requests that are being taken to the TAC. So we're asking for them to allow for remote policy participation. That way, they would have more than just, the minimum requirement to open up the meeting and entertain applications.
Gotcha. So then, is there a mechanism in place is this going to require staff now track who dialed in and how many times they dialed in, and, you'd be at number 3, so you either have to be here or you're out?
Yes, ma'am.
We have something in place to make sure, because there's a difference between people who are willing and able to serve and can physically make the meetings, and something happens and you have travel or you have a vacation or whatever, and I get that, but I just want to make sure that we have committee members who are willing and able to serve, and when they can be there, will be there.
Yes, ma'am.
Going forward, and if they're not, then maybe there's a different issue that we need to address.
I agree 100%, ma'am, and I've had that discussion with the staff. We will have a process in place to track how many people are exercising the remote policy, and actually determining, is this a real need, or is this a lack of will to actually be a motivated participant? And we'll make sure that if it's the latter, that'll be brought to the board, for concern and addressing.
All right, because I also want to make sure that, this isn't used as a mechanism to make a quorum either.
Of course. Well, we can't. It has to have a
Yes,
quorum.
so it can't.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We have a motion?
We did.
Yep, second?
I did.
All right, we're just making sure. Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Department of Finance, SF Mobile Vision Dell Power Edge Server for BWC/in-car cameras for deputies.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Wilma Ward, Director of Finance. IT will be upgrading the Dell Power Edge server for the BWC in-car cameras for the deputies. This includes the on-site professional service, data migration, and disk publishing. A purchase order would be issued to SF Mobile Vision for $19,132.50 to be transferred out of a contingency fund to cover the cost. So we're asking that we recommend the board transfer $19,132.50 from contingency into IT to pay for the BWC in-car camera upgrade.
Do you have any discussion on this? Any questions from Ms. Ward?
So we can assume funds are available in the contingency fund, otherwise you would not be standing here asking
I would
us.
not be standing here.
Thank you.
And if I may add to the discussion, this is a request that came to us directly from the Commonwealth Attorney. It goes beyond the body-worn camera issue. These body-worn cameras, data is actually downloaded into evidence onto the server, and then that server is then accessed by the Commonwealth Attorney to help build cases. The server that's currently in place is so old that she explained to us that it's taken her hours now to try to access the server and get the data that she needs to build her case. So she's requesting that this actually be an upgrade to that server so she can have faster access to the evidence that she needs, so the courthouse and the court cases can be more streamlined. So it is a pressing issue.
I move to transfer $19,132.50 from a contingency into IT to pay for the BWC in-car camera upgrade.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services, appointments, reappointments to the King George Local Emergency Planning Committee, LEPC.
Yes, ma'am. This shouldn't really be an action item. It could have been captured in the county administrator report, but the bottom line is this is the members of the LEPC that Chief Moody is asking for the board to be appointed or reappointed to the LEPC for a 2-year term, and the members are presented in the board report.
Move to appoint, reappoint the persons identified in the board, in the presentation as presented to the KGLEPC for a 2-year term.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye, motion carries. County Administration, update to financial policies.
Yes, ma'am. We have had continued experience with 3 issues regarding the credit card purchases in the county. Number one, we've had lack of supporting documentation, specifically sales receipts for credit card purchases. The lack, when we do receive sales receipts, they're often not itemized receipts for credit card purchases. And we also run across continuous problems where we had sales tax being paid for on local government purchases. The Finance Department has spent the last 2 years advising the credit card holders of these violations and has continually requested adherence to our policies. However, we still have experienced these issues, and they've become a chronic problem. In light of this, the staff has proposed to include amendments to our financial policies to rectify these issues. I recommend the board adopt the amendments to the financial policy as presented. And if you go through the financial policy, you'll see specifically that we're taking a firm stance with credit card holders that if they don't have the supporting documentation that's required as lined by our financial policy, or if they don't have the itemized sales receipts, or if they continue to have sales tax being paid for on local government purchases, then their credit cards will be suspended until they receive formal counseling from the director and an approval from both the finance director and the county administrator.
I got a question. So I brought this up a year ago, 2 years ago. Last time I checked, so my numbers could be off, we had over 70 purchase cards for this county. I think that number is very, very high. I think it's very hard to track. I think that you can have some spending that takes place that maybe shouldn't have occurred, or maybe there could have been other ways, bulk purchasing, something like that. I still don't like the idea that we have that many purchase cards out. If there is a way to streamline that in, not everybody in a department needs to have a card. If there's a need that's demonstrated, fine. But I think everything else should be going through the department head and then up to the financial department. There needs to be some oversight. The more cards you have out there, the more oversight we have of spending county dollars.
Yes, sir. You brought that issue up 2 years ago, and when you did bring that up, we actually brought down a consolidated list of all the credit card holders, and we actually reduced the amount of credit cards in the administration by 20 cards. And I can say with confidence that those that do have cards do have justifications for those cards. And we've also have put in place an agreement that no cards are being added to the inventory without the express approval of the finance director, the director, and the county administrator. So we have control over the generation of new credit cards. In addition, we do have a tight process in place where no less than 3 different sets of eyes review all these different credit card purchases that come through the county. So I have 100% confidence in our oversight, ensuring that there's not improper purchases being made. And if anything, we're taking even stricter policies and self-policing more to even perfect our process with this policy amendment that we recommended to the Board of Supervisors. So I think that our policy is intact, and definitely the integrity of the process is intact. And we'll continue to refine our financial policies and make sure that the county is in the best standing with government credit card purchases.
Are folks being issued a tax exempt number as well with the cards, so they have that number?
Yes, sir. Each credit card holder has been given a laminated card. For example, I have mine on my desk. And what happens is they're supposed to go to Food Lion, or if they go to Walmart to make a government purchase, they're supposed to present that card. The problem is that means they have to step out of line, go to the customer service desk, probably spend 10, 15 minutes explaining why they need or why they deserve the tax exemption, or in some cases, notify them that there is such thing as a tax exemption and have to figure that piece out. Or the problem is that some people find that process burdensome, and what they do is end up going to make the purchases anyway, and then they rather fight it out with the finance department rather than fight it out with the biller. So now we're going to give the finance department the tools that they need to say, hey, you want to go fight it out with the purchaser, because if you bring it back to the county with that sales tax, then your credit card's going to be suspended.
Thank you.
Mr. Granger.
Only thing I'd ask is, I see in the county credit card use agreement, it already says, I understand the county may terminate my right to use the county credit card at any time and for any reason, and I agree to return the card to the county immediately upon request or termination of employment. So I certainly don't mind putting the extra verbiage into the policy, but it kind of seemed like it was already covered by that to me. Am I mistaken?
Yes, sir. It's already covered, but we wanted to make sure that it wasn't generic or ambiguous language. I think, by the way, that we're capturing now is very detailed. Hey, these are the 3 things specifically that will get your credit card suspended, and we're actually going to send these signature pages out to every credit card holder. They're going to sign them again. They're going to have the new policy, and there won't be any gray area. If you are in violation of one of these 3 issues, then this is going to be the repercussions for the violation of the financial policy.
Okay, and I'm fine with that. The other thing I have is a real nit, and so I apologize, I should have emailed you about it, and I didn't. So I see the verbiage is added to a handful of different sections. The second sentence says, cards for deactivated for failing to meet the county financial policy. I believe that first word "for" should probably be struck and should say, cards deactivated for failing to meet the county financial policy.
Okay.
And I think it's in that, it looked like it was copy-pasted, so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll fix that.
Ms. Kupka, I know you had a question.
So, Ms. Ward, please thank your procurement officer, Ms. Cobb, because I obtained these from her today, and I asked for one for every one of my colleagues. So we are all on notice and can police ourselves as well. I agree. I don't think it's acceptable that employees were skirting the process and not wanting to fight it out with the Food Lion clerk or the Walmart manager, and choosing their battles with the Department of Finance puts you in a terrible situation, and you shouldn't have to be. I would also note that in the management letter on our previous year audit, this was one of the deficiencies that was reported. So I'm glad to see you bring this forward, Dr. Young and Ms. Ward, so that hopefully we won't have that as one of the findings in our management letter next year. I think, one other thing. Is there a mechanism in place whereby employees who have the card sign something to acknowledge they have received this policy update, they have received it and they acknowledge it and they agree to abide by it, so that later, if we have to pull a card from someone, we don't have someone say, oh, well, I didn't know you changed the policy, I didn't see that, you can't take away my card, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Is there something we can make people sign to acknowledge receipt of this so we can enforce this, so it really has teeth?
Yes, ma'am. That's that last page, the last signature page. That's going to be sent out to every credit card holder, and every credit card holder is going to have to bring that into procurement. And we'll make sure that everybody has good understanding, and we have records that they are aware of the new policy. I'm sorry.
So then I just ask, if they don't turn this in signed, their card gets pulled,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
I just had one, in 2.1, the verbiage that's added, just check the spelling and punctuation.
Roger, ma'am.
2.1. Well, you
The only
got-
reason I ask is if we approve and adopt, we're approving and
yeah,
adopting what's
well,
presented, so.
receipts is spelled wrong,
Okay,
for one.
okay.
Gotcha.
I totally looked over that part.
Yeah, that's one I'm just double checking. The other thing I thought was, the only other question I had, just to make sure, is if there isn't, sometimes people, you can't. So basically what we're saying is, you have to make every effort to get whatever clerk, whatever manager of whatever store to waive the sales tax.
Roger, ma'am. And that's why there'll be conversations had with the director, the finance director, and the county administrator. That way, like I said, there is those small cases out there where, every effort is tried and it just wasn't successful, and we understand that, but we just want to basically have that foundation in place to make sure that we have a self-policing policy. And don't get me wrong, it's a chronic problem that takes place within the administration, but I myself have been guilty of it. It's just a chronic problem that, admittedly, we can do a better job at, and I believe that these are the tools that we need to set the standard for going forward with our financial policies. So,
I got you. Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve and adopt the amendment to the financial policy as presented with the modification to fix the spelling of receipts and to remove the extra word "for" in the sentences.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you for your staff, everybody for doing this. This will really help, and hopefully that will not be on our audit this year. I know it won't be on our audit this year.
it won't be, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, County Administration improvement to Indian Town Road.
The Virginia Department of Transportation, or VDOT, has completed their improvements to Route 610, also known as Indian Town Road. In light of these improvements, VDOT has asked the board to adopt the attached resolution so that the road improvements can be added to the secondary road system. Once the improvements are recorded in the secondary system, VDOT will assume responsibility for the maintenance of the infrastructure. A map detailing the new footprint and the referenced improvements has been included in the board book. I recommend the board adopt the attached resolution authorizing the improvements to Indian Town Road be added to the VDOT secondary system.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you. Next, do we have any discussion items?
No, ma'am.
County Administrator's report.
No report.
Oh, thank you, that was quick. Ms. Gufka?
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors convene in closed meeting pursuant to State Code Section 2.2-3711A3 for discussion or consultation with legal counsel pertaining to the potential disposition of publicly held real property or the acquisition of property for a public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the Board of Supervisors. State Code Section 2.2-3711A8 for purposes of discussion and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. And State Code Section 2.2-3711A29 for discussion of the potential award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, including the discussion of the terms or scope of such contract. Invited to attend the closed meeting as necessary are the county administrator and county attorney because they are deemed necessary and their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the topics to be discussed. Pursuant to Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3712F.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are in closed session. Here he is. Ready?
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
Mr. Stonehill, certify? Mr. Bush?
So certify.
Ms. Kupka?
So certify.
Mr. Granger?
So certify.
And I so certify. We are now back in session. Mr. Gregory?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board, I just want to advise you of the proceedings pursuant to the memorandum of agreement that the county has with the Virginia Department of Transportation and the Virginia Tourism Authority for the exchange of replacement parkland for right-of-way needed for the Harry Nice Bridge improvements. Pursuant to that memorandum of agreement, VDOT acquired a replacement property for the parkland that was lost, or there's going to be lost for the Harry Nice Bridge improvements, the wayside portions of Wayside Park and Barnesfield Park. Those properties are on Roseland Road, as you know. As part of that memorandum of agreement, on the Farron parcel, VDOT agreed to construct a small parking lot of approximately, exactly 20 parking spaces of aggregate material. The work on those improvements is going to be proceeding in the very near future, so that will be in the offing soon. VDOT will be prepping that property and then preparing to remove the trees and grade the property, and so those improvements will be taking place over the next few months. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know, but that is pursuant to the terms and the requirements of the memorandum of agreement entered into by the county, Virginia Tourism Corporation, and VDOT to compensate the citizens of King George County and the county for that lost parkland.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn until Thursday, February 20th at 6 p.m. at Company 1.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nay? No. And chair votes aye, and we are done. We're adjourned.